Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in the first of today's videos, we're going to be talking about some James Harden news. We got some news yesterday that Harden has expanded his short list of teams that he would be preferred to be traded to the Milwaukee Bucks and the Miami Heat on a list that already included the Philadelphia 76ers, presumably, and most notably the Brooklyn Nets. So we're going to talk about what exactly this means, talk about a couple of fake trades here, and what else this could spell out for the number of different teams involved. Like I said, the Heat, the Sixers, the Nets, and the Bucks. But with those things said, really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day, all throughout the NBA offseason. It's a great place for consistent NBA content. You can also leave a like rating on the video as well. Helps me out a ton, lets me know that you're enjoying this content, and helps the video get out to more people on YouTube as well. And you can check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen and in a link tree down in the description below. But with those things said, let's talk about the news specifically. So to this point, we know that James Harden doesn't want to be a Houston Rocket anymore, right? There's been plenty of evidence in his own actions and things that he is or is not showing up to, his urgency to show up to Houston Rockets training camp. There's just a lot of different factors going into this mindset right now that at some point James Harden is going to be on a different team. I would imagine that it's going to happen before the season starts on the 22nd, just because things are getting increasingly more awkward with each day. And like the idea of James Harden practicing and playing with this team, despite everybody knowing he doesn't want to be there anymore, feels like a situation Houston doesn't want to be in. That would significantly decrease their leverage and make them a little bit more desperate to move Harden rather than the situation they're in now, where teams are still trying to kind of convince them to trade Harden himself. So this news specifically to me just kind of says that Harden is getting a little bit more desperate to leave Houston. When he requested the trade initially, probably thought it would come about a lot quicker than it has. And now that we're getting closer to the start of the season, he really wants to get out. And so he's trying to give the Rockets even more options, because as much as Harden can't necessarily dictate where he gets traded to, because the Rockets are going to field offers from every team in the league, it de-incentivizes the other, at this point now, 26 teams in the league that are not on Harden's short list, because they don't want to trade for a guy that doesn't want to be there. Like Orlando doesn't want to trade for James Harden if he doesn't want to be with the Magic, because then he becomes the Magic's problem rather than Houston, and you just gave up all these assets to get Harden. So as much as the short list doesn't matter, it also does, because those four teams are confident that if they brought in James Harden, he would be happy there, at least initially. But in terms of these two teams specifically, I'm not positive that they're still great James Harden trade suitors for a couple of reasons. First, we'll talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, and then we'll move on to the Miami Heat. So for the Bucks, they've already made plenty of moves this offseason, most notably bringing in Jrue Holiday for a lot of picks and some players as well. And when you sit down and actually try and do it, you don't just think in your head like, oh, they could move this piece for this piece. When you really try and make the numbers work, it's incredibly difficult to come up with a trade that involves Milwaukee landing James Harden in a scenario in which Houston gets significant value back on a similar level to the value they'd be getting back in a potential Sixers or Nets trade, or at least some things that have been rumored and reported, right? So the reason for that is because the Bucks just don't have the draft assets. They can't just be like, here's DiVincenzo, some matching salaries, DJ Wilson, and every first round pick that we have, because they don't really have that many available. They can offer a few pick swaps, but the draft assets, the draft capital, that just isn't there in comparison to a team like Brooklyn that has access to all of their picks moving forward. And so what that means is, okay, well, you need to involve either Jrue Holiday or Chris Middleton, more likely Chris Middleton, in the trade, and ship that guy to a third team that would be willing to give up assets for Holiday or Middleton, and then send those assets to Houston. But the more you look around the league, it's kind of like, who actually wants Middleton, who'd be giving up the assets. That team would have to give up draft assets in exchange for Middleton to then be rerouted to Houston, because Milwaukee doesn't have their own draft assets. And all of that thinking is how you get to something like this. I understand that this is not a good deal. I understand that it's a deal that doesn't make sense for at least 2 out of the 3 teams, but this gives you an indication of how difficult it can be to come up with a Bucks Harden trade that makes sense when you involve a third team and you try and get the Rockets significant value in return. So the Bucks would be receiving James Harden and the Danny Green expiring. The Rockets would get Jrue Holiday, Chris Middleton, Matisse Thybulle, and 3 picks, 2 of which from Milwaukee that are pick swaps, 1 of which from Philly, which is a 2021 first. And the Sixers are getting Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker. The mindset here is the Bucks are getting James Harden. They're getting Danny Green, who can also shoot, but Harden is obviously the big deal here. Hopefully Giannis re-signs to the Supermax, and you move forward from there. For the Sixers, they're getting some perimeter help. They're getting a guy in PJ Tucker that can help defend on the wing. That is a veteran presence. That is a playoff experienced player. And Eric Gordon provides them some playmaking, some shooting, some scoring on the perimeter. And all they're giving up would be the Danny Green expiring, Matisse Thybulle, who I know they really like, and then the first round pick. But these are just more proven players that Daryl Morey is familiar with, and players that would really help Philadelphia push towards being a really good playoff team. Meanwhile, for the Rockets, they're getting Holiday, Middleton, a young piece in Thybulle, 2 pick swaps, and a pick. So this is more of a let's get veterans in return for James Harden so that we're still kind of good. And then you've got Wall, Holiday, Middleton, Thybulle, Christian Wood, DeMarcus Cousins, whatever, and these extra picks. You've gotten out of some salary with the Eric Gordon money, although you're taking on salary with the Chris Middleton money, and then you kind of move forward from there. I understand it's not a trade that makes sense. This just kind of gives you a bit of a glimpse into what it's like to actually try and come up with deals like this, specifically for Milwaukee. So I say all those things to say, I don't think the Milwaukee aspect of this is A, all that interesting, or B, all that realistic right now, unless they come up with a crazy 3 or 4 team trade that actually ends up making sense for everyone. So that means now that we got to move on to Miami Heat. And this might deserve its own video at some point, but the Heat stuff is getting a little bit out of control, in my opinion, because there are people that I've seen that are saying that they would not give up Tyler Herro for James Harden, which to me doesn't make a ton of sense. So I personally don't think that Tyler Herro is good enough to be the centerpiece of a James Harden trade. I know that the Heat love Tyler Herro. I know that he just had an awesome rookie year, but he's quickly becoming the most overrated player in the entire league, in my opinion. There's a difference between saying, I don't know if I would give up Herro for Harden straight up, or saying the Harden for Herro trade that's been kind of thrown around doesn't make sense necessarily for Miami, because that's a different conversation, because you're not just giving up Tyler Herro in exchange for James Harden. You're also giving up all your future assets in terms of draft stuff. You'd give up a lot of first and pick swaps. You'd be giving up all of your cap flexibility to have Harden on the roster, and you'd be taking yourself out of the 2021 free agency sweepstakes, which with the way stuff is going with Giannis right now, assuming they don't get Harden or another big time player, things are kind of leaning towards Giannis potentially considering other teams in 2021 free agency way more than I thought, and the chances of that happening are increasing each and every day. So that's a different conversation when you're trading out Herro, some other assets, and the opportunity to chase 2021 free agents in exchange for Harden. That's a different conversation. But Tyler Herro is the centerpiece of a James Harden trade. I don't personally see that. I don't think that there's enough value here. Here's an example of one of the trades that has been kind of thrown around there, where it's Harden in exchange for Dragic, Olynyk, Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Herro, and 3 first-round picks, and you can throw some pick swaps in there however you want to. My issue with this is you're basically trading for one player that's under contract for next season, and that's Tyler Herro, and then 3 future firsts in exchange for James Harden. And Miami presumably is going to be good moving forward with Butler and Harden, and then they're going to figure out a way to be good after that too, because they're one of the best organizations in the league. It's not like you're trading for future first-round picks from the LA Clippers. Like, the Miami Heat are going to be a good team continually because they're just one of the better run organizations in the league. So, you know, Dragic would opt out the next year. Olynyk would be an expiring or opt out. Robinson would need a new deal. Kendrick Nunn is just And yeah, Tyler Herro's on a rookie deal for the next couple years, and you're excited to have Tyler Herro and the picks on your roster. But that in exchange for James Harden, in comparison to the Nets offering everybody on their roster not named Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and all of their picks, or just getting Ben Simmons and stuff from Philadelphia, I'd much rather have those 2 packages than this one from Miami. I think that we are really overvaluing what Tyler Herro is worth to other teams. I understand how much Miami likes him, but we have to consider Tyler Herro's value to other teams. And yes, he had a good rookie year, was really good during the postseason at times. Other times he wasn't so great. But I don't know why we're suddenly considering him to be worthy of like the centerpiece of a James Harden trade. So that's where I'm at with Miami. So what I come back to at the end of the day is, it's interesting that these 2 teams have been added to the short list. It shows that Harden is probably getting more desperate to get out of Houston, and probably increases the likelihood that he will be out of Houston within the next week and a half to 2 weeks. But I still think that this comes down to Philadelphia or Brooklyn. I think that those are still the 2 teams that are best positioned to provide significant assets in exchange for James Harden, or can best facilitate a third team to bring in assets in exchange for James Harden, rather than the weird stuff that Milwaukee's going to have to do, or what is quite honestly a pretty limited set of assets if you're excluding Bam, which I would hope the Heat would exclude Bam in a James Harden trade. They just don't have the same asset level, in my opinion, that Philadelphia and Brooklyn do. Now, I don't know if those are actually going to be the 2 teams. It could be a mystery team that comes out of nowhere. Toronto could randomly trade for James Harden or something. But if we're looking at the way things are right now and how this news impacts the Harden situation, I think that it shows that he's getting more desperate. But overall, probably still going to be Brooklyn or Philly as the front runners right now, in my opinion, and still hoping it's going to happen within like the next 2 weeks or so, because we're 11 days away from the start of the NBA season. But with all those things said, that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I will see you all next time.